All right, so track 2, create a complex mechanical object. So this is one where you are focusing on one particular object and adding all of the, details and individual pieces to it, sort of like a hero model, something like that. And so I'm going to just start by showing you straight up a couple of examples so you know what the heck I'm talking about. So here we have someone building a motor. Now these are from a different assignment than what you are doing. So for starters, there's no materials on here, there's no lights on here, and we're learning different tools. These are actually kind of old, but these are still student examples. And so you can see the amount of pieces are on here. And actually they've got them combined. If I separate them, then we can see how they put this together. The body of the motor is way too simple for what we're doing, right? There needs to be more work there, but these pieces are pretty nicely done. So we've got like different little cogs and screws and belts, and I won't even pretend to know how a motor works really. But when this goes into here, that kind of a thing, we don't want it to be intersecting, but we do like the fact that there is this loop right here that would sort of connect it in. We've got some bolts in various places. I really like this right here, the edge of this, sort of holding this down onto there, and again, some bolts. So there's a lot of pieces that went into this. You all have, I think, better modeling skills than this, but also, again, there needs to be materials on here. Doesn't have to be a real life object. So this person made like an old fashioned tin toy. Here you can see what materials really does for this, the different colors, letting the pieces stand out. The way they modeled this with the edges to make the edges a little bit sharper, as if it was like hammered tin. The nice little bolts coming down off the side. Some great wheels. All right. So these are, and even like the pin coming in through there. There's a lot of intersections and examples I'm going to show you, which you can see in here. So don't do that. You don't have to present them on these pedestals, by the way. That was something that they had to do. All right, but I really liked the color scheme they had here. And again, it's sort of like a whimsical, completely made up thing that they created. And they actually, no, they didn't cut it in half. So yeah, they just modeled this very carefully so that the two sides were the same. So next example I have up is a set of sort of like steampunk goggle things. And there's a little bit more going on here than you would see. And again, this is where materials come in handy. So you can see there's these like rings around the outside. And if I assign a different material to them, right now you can start to appreciate some of the work this person put in here. And you can see, for example, that these are, let me see if I can focus in on this. There we go. Are modeled as if they're clamping around this, right? And you can't see that if you have, everything set to Lambert. So setting up your materials is going to be very, very important. I can set this to, oh, for heaven's sake, edit. Don't be deleting your history. This is just me futzing around. There we go. Right, so just the act of getting a couple different textures on here, and now suddenly we can see the work they did. If these were semi-transparent, what that would add to it, right? They've got these nice little doodads, and we can see here, right, the gear actually has a hole in it, so they're not intersecting, and this piece is separate from this piece. And then this is a repeat of this. It's just one is smaller than the other, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Haha. Every time you can, there's things you can do to make things a little bit easier, right? And I think, what did they put down here? Oh wow, I think they were only part done, and they were trying to make like a gear set that would interlock, like as a medallion. But again, very, very important. Make sure that you're considering your materials, because that is going to be a huge part of making these pieces stand out from each other, because it is about making something that has interlocking pieces. This fits underneath this. This little clamp here fits around that. This is punching through this, right? They're not just intersecting, they're actually interacting with each other. Now this one is unfinished, but I like to bring it out for a couple of reasons. One, even the unfinished version has a lot of nice work in it. So the body of this is one piece, kind of like, the hammer or anything was. And then there was other pieces placed on top of it, but they brought back something we have not seen in a long time, the revolved curve. And they made I'm not even sure how they built that control vertex. Let's see. Yeah, they might have made a linear curve so they could get all those sharp edges. Made that, revolved it, and got this. And so they would spend a bunch of time on this because it's like a centerpiece of what they're doing, but then you have 4 of them. So depending on the type of thing you're building, you can maybe afford to spend a lot of time on one particular part because that part's going to be the focal point of things, right? So this kind of detail is what I mean by like this is the hero object. This is the thing that the character stands in front of and ponders their existence for 5 minutes. Like this is a thing that whether it's a game or a movie or whatever we're imagining is going to be the focus. It's not going to be a clock in the background that we never get closer than this to. Right? It's meant to be something we're looking very closely at. And so since you're only doing one object, it should have pieces that interlock with each other, that work with each other. Interlocking doesn't have to mean gears. I say interlocking and people think gears. But it can simply be the pendulum hanging inside the box that is the clock. Like it doesn't, or it could be these posts put up underneath here as if they're part, because they're part of the clock, or these on top of here. So the term interlocking doesn't have to necessarily mean gears. Now, if you are really wanting to do a character, like really absolutely feeling in your bones you need to do a character, you can kind of get around my no character rule by making it a robot, which is also a complex mechanical object. Now, this is not the best example because it is filled to the brim with non-planar geometry. You can see these are being stretched and that's being stretched, and this the whole shebang is there's not enough geometry here to pull off this shape. But there are some other nicer things in here, including I really like the pistons for the legs. So there's a lot of like subtle extruding work going on to make those pistons. This is straight up broken. Don't do that. The extruded pieces here to pull this out. Don't have things intersecting there. But then, a piston here with this piece that fits onto there, right? So there are sort of flashes of brilliance in this. Another thing there, another bit of extrusion there, but then this is intersecting, right? So, and then that's not enough geometry, right? But I love the idea of like, well, it's technically a mechanical object because it's a robot. So don't take this as a perfect example. I've got another one here. It's a little bit incomplete, but much more better modeled. Different take on the kind of screw we've been doing for a while. Nice little spindly knees, although this is intersecting with that a little bit, but it's closer. This is where layout comes into play. This needs to be a little bit bigger, or this needs to be a little bit smaller. One of the two. Let's try smaller for this. Needs to be a little bit smaller, and this should probably be down a little bit, right? So when we say layout, one of the things we're talking about is how these pieces intersect with each other and how much they can stand up to scrutiny versus how much it's going to bug us. Now, if you're out here, which isn't that far away, still pretty close, you would imagine that there's like a ball joint in here and that's how these things are moving. So that's kind of the nice thing about this one. And also the camera head with the little antenna. And you could imagine how it's a little bit broken along the edge here, but you can imagine how if you started to put different metallic textures on these, like maybe some look a little more like chrome and some look more like bronze or something, I don't know, like some look like steel, pick a couple of different metal types and have this be one color and this be another color, you could really make this pop. All right. So if this category does have a character entry, it's just that it has to be mechanical. No organic modeling, please. Frankly, this one is so squishy, it's bordering on organic modeling. We don't want that because we haven't done that yet. So this isn't where it needs to be. So you have to look at it like um, pieces where the individual pieces might rotate, right? That's legit. Things rotating as a whole piece, but no deformation. So don't mix things with that might have deformations on them. All right, but complex mechanical object. Make sure you're focusing on materials too. I'm sorry, I do not have any better examples of materials. Um, Layout comes into play with the pieces and how they are interconnected with each other. Those goggles were intersecting very nicely, or not intersecting, but they were sort of mixing together very nicely using materials. And the lighting should just be to make the model look nice. If you want to make it look like it's in an area, like if you wanted to have these look as if they were in an office, right? That could be how you light them, but however it is, you want to make sure you're lighting them so that we can see them. So like we can see the work that you've done in the gears, or we can see the work that you've done um, on the material. So right, there's no lights on here yet. We would want to put some kind of lights on it. You can also light them as if it's just, hey, we've got it on a stand. So you don't have to go for mood lighting, but you don't want to just throw one directional light on and call it a day. That doesn't count either. All right, now most things we're seeing are wheels, and the example I give in the written form mentions a wagon. And on the other one, if you have read it, it says, oh, you can dress your set with things you've made before. And of course, the elephant in the room is that we made these awesome mechanical wheels that could easily go on a wagon. If you would like to use those in your project, you may. I will know that that's what you modeled for the wheel. They will not count towards your modeling. So if you want to take your weird steampunk wheel that you made for that assignment and do up a full wagon that goes with it, or tank or whatever, that's great. I'll know the wheels, I'll know what they looked like originally, but as long as you do all the rest of the pieces, that's fine to bounce off of that. How they go into the layout, if you put any new materials on them, lighting, that's all new. But if 85% of your quote unquote modeling on this wagon is those wheels, then that you didn't do very much modeling for this assignment, right? So I'll know what's new and what's not. But I don't want to say, no, don't use anything you've ever made before, because they can come in handy. So if you want to pull in the screws you made on other assignments, things like that, again, I'll know they're there, but that's okay. So just as long as you're using them to add to things and they're not like getting you out of modeling stuff. That's the idea. All right, but it's going to be sort of one cohesive object. Remember that there's plenty of tools and overview in here to review for things. I'm going to be making one about smoothing. And in particular, the one you should watch out for is the one on pivot points, world space versus object space. So if we're dealing with these complex interlocking things, these ideas could come in handy. So once this video is up, which should be by the time you're looking at this, that is what you're going to want to look at specific for this track. And if there's any other things, please let me know what you'd like me to cover. And then I can, as we're going over the next few weeks, I can put up videos on that subject. All right.